What a beautiful day it is today. And it's good to celebrate our 31st Forum on Tolerance together. Welcome, welcome to North Shore Community College. My name is Sheldon Brown. I'm the co-chair of the Forums on Tolerance and one of its founders. Please open up your blue brochures on your chair and find Forums at a glance. Look for the second forum on 5/28/97. One of the keynote speakers was Vera Laska, who spoke on the topic Women, Resistance, and the Holocaust. Dr. Laska was a heroic freedom fighter against the Nazis during the Holocaust. She joined the Czech underground at age 15 and helped rescue hundreds of POWs and Jews. After World War II, she became a new immigrant and was appointed professor at Regis College in Weston, Massachusetts. Dr. Laska was introduced to North Shore Community College audience by her former student, Janice Forstrom. Jan has had a long association with the Forums going back 16 years. She is now both our vice president and interim president. It's an honor to call upon President Janice Forstrom to greet us.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheldon. We're so grateful to Dr. Sheldon Brown for really starting up this program and seeing it through 31 years. So congratulations to you. As well as to the whole committee that works on these forums from here from the college. And would those individuals just stand up, the committee who works on this, just for a second? So I want to welcome you on behalf of North Shore Community College on this beautiful day. My own roots go back. My grandparents on both my mother and father's side were immigrants, and so my roots are, let's see, Poland, Italy, France through Canada, Greece, England. I think that's about, is that it? But so I am the product of immigration here to the United States and these wonderful individuals in my family that were leaders to me, encouraging education, encouraging being excited about the opportunities that are here in America, and fostering a lot of the values and work ethic and just love of life that they shared with me. So I'm very, very pleased to be part of this today and bringing back the thoughts of my former teacher, who was a most inspiring individual. And I was so pleased when she came here and spoke many, many years ago. At that time, I never thought that I would be here welcoming all of you. And I do appreciate it. So you never know what's going to happen in life, and look forward, and I hope you will enjoy this wonderful panel and presentation today. Thank you very much.
My name is Tatiana Espinal. I'm Development Director here at North Shore Community College, and I am honored to be moderating the 31st Forum on Tolerance. at North Shore, entitled Immigrant Voices, We the People. And immigration is a subjective, sometimes very personal subject. And including for myself, I am also an immigrant. My husband and I are both from Honduras. And ever since we came to the States, we've been working very hard to achieve that American dream. And as Jan said, I never thought I would be at this podium. I'm an alum of North Shore. I started here when I just came from Honduras. I never thought I would come back to work for the college and moderate, so thank you for having me. Now, before we start today, there's a few things that I'd like to do. First is explain to you how the forum is kind of organized this morning. The forum will be divided in two parts. The first panel will be entitled Immigrants as American Assets. We will present two experts in the field of immigration here, and I'll go ahead and introduce them in a little bit. They will both have about 15 minutes to speak, followed by a 10-minute question and answer segment. After that, we will have a 20-minute break, and at that time, we encourage everybody to move around the gym, visit the tables at the back that has great information about immigration, and then there will be a fun activity that's going to be presented to you at that time. We hope that you participate. After that, at about 11 o'clock in the morning, we are going to have our second panel. And we are very excited that two of our current North Shore Community College students will be sharing their personal experience with immigration. They are not only students, they both work, and they both have been very involved in advocating and educating the public about immigration. We will also have a expert attorney who deals with immigrants and immigrant issues on a daily basis. She's local from Neighborhood Legal Services here in Lynn, and she will be explaining the deferred action for childhood arrivals. You might have heard of DACA. So it's a very good opportunity to ask any questions of how that works. And she will also be talking about her opinion about immigration reform. Now to the housekeeping announcements. During question and answers, there are two mics. There's one on this aisle and one on the other aisle. At that time, please feel free to step up to the mic and ask your question. If you would prefer not to step up to the mic, you would rather have us read the question. You've been giving index cards when you walked in, hopefully. Please write your questions down, and there's going to be a few gentlemen going around picking up the index cards. And they'll be bringing them up to the front, and I'll be reading them to the panelists. Also, this event today is a public event, so it is being recorded by LynnCAM, our local cable station. Also, please take a few moments to shut off your cell phones. That would be great if you could do that if you haven't already. And finally, please refrain from any side conversations during the forum. Okay, so now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Jeff Gross. So let me start by reading a very brief bio of Dr. Gross. He is director of the New Americans Integration Institute at the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition in Boston, or MIRA. The Institute's current areas of work include citizenship, immigrant entrepreneurship, recertification of immigrant professionals, advancing immigrant access to educational opportunities from early education and care to higher education, and educating the public on the contributions of immigrants. Dr. Gross has written policy papers and presented locally and nationally on issues of workforce development, immigrant entrepreneurship, and educational challenges impacting Massachusetts immigrant communities. Welcome, Dr. Gross. And you have 15 minutes to present.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Seems like, well, so Tatiana, thank you so much for that kind and generous introduction, and thank you, all of you, President Forstrom, the members of the committee, and also Diana Terry, who worked sort of tirelessly to get this coordinated and set up. It's a real honor to be part of this, the Forum on Tolerance with its long and distinguished history. And from my point of view, there's no better time to include the discussion of immigration as part of that. What I'm going to offer here today really is, or this morning, is just a starting point for the larger conversation we're going to be involved in today, a picture and a story about who the immigrants in Massachusetts are and what really makes them part of the Commonwealth. Some of the facts that I'll be going through will be familiar to you, some of them won't be. Certainly for those of you who are immigrants, who come from immigrant families or work with immigrants, which really includes probably everybody here today, you know that this is a rich, complex, and an ongoing story and an ongoing conversation. So I'll just start with a brief background on my organization, the Mirror Coalition. We've been around since 1986 and now work with over 130 member organizations across the state, all of them advocating, organizing, and working, as you can see, in a wide variety of areas. I put up this slide not really just to tell you about who we are and who I am, but to make the point that I think is particularly relevant in a forum talking about immigrant voices and immigrants as assets, which is that the voice that immigrants bring with, one of the greatest assets that immigrants bring with them is their own voice, and the readiness to join when they come here in that very American tradition of free speech and civic engagement on behalf of their own rights and opportunities and those of their community, both the immigrant community and the larger community of which they're a part. So the part of MIRA that I direct, which is the New Americans Integration Institute, is very much about supporting those opportunities that immigrants are seeking, pathways into citizenship, higher education, better jobs, and business creation, as well as fostering the assets of cultural and social diversity that immigrants bring with them, another very American tradition. So this is really the question that I think I've already started to answer, and I think you already know is one that really doesn't have a clear answer. But I want to stop to say at this point, just in terms of definition, because there are many ways of looking at this issue in terms of my definition of immigrants, at least for the purpose of this discussion, which is really folks who are foreign-born and who have come here with the intent to settle in the United States. And that settlement could be in 1,000 ways and for 1,000 different reasons, for as many, in many cases, as there are immigrants, and with dozens, frankly, of legal statuses, which maybe Jennifer can get into a little bit. The immigration law, people say, is second only to tax law in its complexity. But where this leaves out a large group of people who come here as students or on business or just visiting, but who can and often do become immigrants later on down the line. It also includes many people who live here for all intents and purposes, but also spend and work and live a great deal of time outside the country, often having lives both in here and in their home country. So the next 2 or 3 slides are going to be a lot of numbers, but hopefully I'll be able to they'll tell a fairly clear story, and I'll later on be able to sort of explain a little bit more about the details. When we talk about immigrants in Massachusetts and in the U.S. in general, we're talking about a large and a growing population, 15%, almost 1 in 5 of the residents, 1 in 6 of residents of the state. However, it's not as big as the immigrant population that was here in the 1920s. At that point, when some of our grandparents were around, actually almost 2 out of every 5 residents of the state were immigrants, many, many more than in the country as a whole. And in fact, it's still many more than in the country as a whole. But it is still large and growing nonetheless by more than a quarter in the last decade. And it's a decade that, in fact, would have seen a decline in the population of the state and the state's workforce and many, many important areas of the state economy if it weren't for these new arrivals. And these new arrivals, and in many cases very old arrivals, because we're also talking about folks who've been here for decades, come here for many, really, as I said, almost as many reasons as are immigrants. They come for work, to join their family members, to find opportunities of all kinds, including refugees who come here to find the freedom and safety that they don't have in their own country. So, as you can see, they also make up, although they make up 1 in 6 of the population, immigrants are in fact 1 in 5 of state workers in all sectors of the economy, adding jobs, not taking away jobs, but from native-born residents, but supporting job creation and economic development by filling gaps in the labor force, supporting new business creation, and also participating in the workforce at a level that's really out of proportion to their presence in the general population. You know, again, for many, many reasons and in many kinds of businesses that speak to why they came here in the first place and to the economic and family roots that they're putting down here. And those roots, to speak to the last bullet on the slide, includes family and children. Close to a third of the children under 6 in Massachusetts are in immigrant families. It's families with at least 1 immigrant parent or guardian. And 95% of those are, in fact, U.S. citizens. If you're looking for something about the role of immigrants and what they bring to the future of the state, you don't really have to look further than this one piece of information. Okay, last very dense slide with charts. So the other important fact about, and the actually distinct fact about immigrants in Massachusetts is their diversity. It's much more, a much wider range of people here from many different parts of the world than in most other parts of the country. You have, I removed the numbers from the chart to hopefully make it a little bit less intimidating, but I'll have to add the numbers back. You have more than a third of immigrants from Latin America, but in that case we're talking about Mexico, Central America, South America, the Caribbean, Haitians, Portuguese-speaking immigrants from Brazil, Spanish-speaking immigrants from all over Latin America. So that one statistic also encompasses a huge and diverse range of folks. Almost a third from Asia, a quarter from Europe, quite a lot, almost 10% from Africa, many who've come as refugees, many who've come in other ways. And of course, you know, even across the town, even across the state, there are wide variations. Some towns like Lynn have populations and diversity much greater and much different than the rest of the state. We'll sort of go into that a little bit in the future slides. So, you know, just again to fill in a little bit of the background about, and again, it's a very broad brush, and I'll be able to sort of fill in a little bit more of the details, and some of you may already realize some of the complexities here. But more than half of the immigrants in the state have made what's really far from an easy journey to become naturalized citizens. And the majority of the rest are what are often called green card holders. And that's, again, really a great diversity of individuals and families working to build a better life for themselves and their communities, including a majority who, like the rest of the state, are increasingly seeking pathways into higher education. So 52% of the immigrants over 25, which of course includes many of the students here at North Shore Community Colleges and many of the students in colleges and universities around the Commonwealth. Among the group of immigrants, including some of the students at NSCC and some who you'll hear from today, are a large share of unauthorized immigrants, somewhere like 160 to 200,000 in the Commonwealth, 1 out of 6 of all immigrants. 10 to 20,000 of them are eligible for what Jennifer will talk about, the Deferred Action for Childhood status. 30% of those already have a BA or higher, So they lack, in some ways, legal status to be here, but they're working, in fact, at an even higher rate than the immigrant population at large, paying taxes, going to school, attending houses of worship, sending their children to school. Many of their children who are, in fact, themselves, the majority, are citizens. As I said, it's a complex picture, so in the next couple of slides, I'm going to dig in to just a couple of snapshots of two areas to give you a little bit of a sense of what's going on in one industry sector, healthcare, and one city, the city of Lynn that we're in now. In terms of, as I said, it's sort of impossible to provide a really detailed summary of all the different roles that immigrants play in the state's social and economic life. But this snapshot really relates to the state's largest and fastest growing industry, which is healthcare. 1 out of almost 7 workers in the state. And this is an industry in which immigrants fill roles throughout the workforce, something, frankly, anyone who's gone to a hospital, gone to a healthcare center, been visiting parents in an elder care facility, or gone, to a preschool can testify. Immigrants here are filling roles throughout the workforce. 3/5 of the physicians in the state, two-fifths, excuse me. 2/5 of the physician in the state in an area that's really running short of primary care physicians and many specialists. 1/3 of nursing aides that tend to an increasingly aging and longer living population, as well as one that increasingly faces the needs for the kinds of culturally and linguistically competent medical care that immigrant workers bring. So immigrants are, in short, in this, as in many other areas, crucial to the future of the state healthcare industry, and something that all residents in the state, foreign and native born, will increasingly need to rely on. So now we turn to Lynn, and I'm a little apprehensive going into the slide here, because I think I may, although I live in Salem nearby, and my organization has a lot of activities in Lynn, I'm not as familiar as I hope to be at some point, so I'm ready to be questioned on some of the details in the background here. But again, just to make the point, Lynn's population, 3 out of 10 of the almost 100,000 residents of Lynn are in fact immigrants, more than double actually the rate of Massachusetts at large, and not untypical for many towns in the North Shore, including some of your neighbors in Salem, in Everett, in Chelsea, and in Boston as well. Immigrants, again, and it's a bit of a different distribution than the state at large. Many from Latin America, but that's, as I said, a very diverse group: Haitians, Dominicans, Mexicans, Brazilians, but also a higher share of immigrants and refugees from Africa than in the state at large. Many of them refugees, but also 4,000 Cambodians, one of the largest Cambodian communities in the state. So again, as in Massachusetts at large, or actually done like Massachusetts at large, this 30% is really close to the 30% of immigrants who made Lynn a very strong immigrant city in the 1930s, when the shoe factories and the textile factories that defined the economy of the town was getting going, a point at which many Eastern European immigrants, Irish immigrants, and immigrants from Italy were the dominant groups here. So Lynn, and as I was talking with somebody just before, and I think is sort of not a secret, Lynn is a city that struggles in many ways with its immigrants' identity, even as immigrants are coming to define it. But it's also a city that, because of its strong immigrant and working class roots, is one where one of the most powerful points of that identity as an immigrant city is the strong collaboration that at least I know I've seen and many others have seen between immigrants and labor unions, immigrants and workers. That includes service workers unions, in which immigrants play a large role, but also more traditional blue-collar unions. And this is something that's been evident for several years. And the picture here of the May Day rally on May 10th, which was as much a rally for workers as it was for immigrants, I think really spoke, when I was there, to the unity in the community. I've also listed here some of the community-based organizations that are coming to shape and support the immigrant communities here. Did I, by the way, run over my time?
You have 1 minute.
1 minute, okay, just wanted to check. I've listed a few, but I've also left some important out that maybe you don't think of as community groups, but that includes the North Shore Latino Business Association, which supports many of the thriving immigrant businesses in the city. And maybe even, just as important, dozens and dozens of houses of worship, which is in many cases really the core of the immigrant community and what builds community and outreach. So I'm gonna actually skip the following slide, which is a little snapshot of one immigrant business, because Marcia is going to speak a lot too. I don't think she'll mention traditional breads, but she has a lot of information to share about a range of immigrant businesses in the Commonwealth. And I'm about to be stopped, but since I began with the voices of community organizations and community advocacy, I thought it was important to end with state policy and the state policy that's come to shape, in terms of my work, the state support of the value and role and importance of immigrants in the Commonwealth. And a policy that's in many ways a reflection of the voices of immigrants who helped shape it, along with organizations like mine and, in fact, Marcia's that I'm really proud to have played a role in. So I'm going to leave this up, and maybe I can speak to a few of these points during the question and answer.
Absolutely.
So anyway, thank you all very much, and I welcome any questions.
So now I'd like to open the floor to questions for Dr. Gross. So you can either step up to the mic or raise your hand if your index card has not been picked up yet.
Okay, you said that 72% of the immigrants came before 2000. Does that mean the numbers have slowed coming into Lynn?
No, I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I think there still is a fair. I mean, that's a good question. Whether it's increased at the same rate in the state at large, which I suspect it probably has. So if you're actually talking about a 25% increase over the last 10 years, that's actually fairly close to the difference between 72% and the total. So it may have been somewhat slower than in other areas of the state, but. I'd say it's been roughly. I mean, again, I haven't looked at. I have to sort of look at the numbers. But I think and it's not, again, even though immigrants, it's not just that immigrants come to Lynn. Immigrants may come and settle in Boston and Chelsea and then move to Lynn. Lynn, for example, also in terms of the diversity of the folks here, has had over the last few years, especially in the mid 2000s or the late 2000s rather, a large number of Iraqi refugees. As well as refugees from different parts of Africa, which are in total numbers small, but they've really added significantly to the diversity of the community here. So,
Because Lynn's very transient. Do you find that they're staying here then?
I think that's always the question. People, and because the kinds of data we have really take snapshots year by year and across 3 or 5 year spans. We use census data called the American Community Survey. And it tells us at any one time who's there, but this is a really issue. It doesn't tell us because we have in Massachusetts in general, but in particular I would say, among some immigrant communities, a certain degree of transientness. And that's something, that really does need to be looked at a kind of city by city and regional basis. But it does create issues in terms of people putting down roots and providing services, in building the kinds of network connections that are really important to, establishing yourself in a community. So it's an important question, and I unfortunately don't have the answer I'd like to have.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Jeff, do you want to repeat the question?
Yes. So the question was, do the numbers that I put up in terms of the numbers of immigrants in the state includes immigrant children who've come with their parents and are unauthorized but are often in most cases in the schools, but as you said, are sort of floating, and it's not necessarily identified, sometimes by their own choice, because having an authorized status is not necessarily something that everybody is ready to expose, even in some cases to other community members. Yes, the answer is yes. I mean, it's how people estimate what share of the immigrant population in the state. In this case, I said it was about 1 in 6 are, so to speak, unauthorized. It involves a little, basically, it involves a little sort of tricky games with some census numbers, and it really is only as an estimate, because none of the census information that we have has a question about, do you have legal status in this country? We wouldn't necessarily expect people to answer it, that way. But so the numbers of the undocumented, of unauthorized immigrants are about 1 in 6, say about 160,000. And of those, maybe 15 to 20,000, I think is the figure, fall into that category of, well, this is not the total number of students, of unauthorized students who are in the high schools, but it is the sort of group of people who fall into the category of people who are eligible for deferred action for childhood arrivals. And Jennifer, just from Neighborhood Legal Services, will give a description of that. The people who arrived before age 16, before, I think 2008, January 31st, 2008. I'm sure I'm wrong on that, but there's a specific date. And are either enrolled in school or are getting ready to enroll in some sort of educational program. So that's that group. Does that answer the question?
I saw a list of organizations on the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
Any of those organizations target that area that I just spoke about, children that graduate college high school, or in high school or middle school? Like what are their next steps? Like any of those organizations that could help kids in that category?
Well, there are really 2 organizations that come to mind when you mention that. One is the Student Immigrant Movement, which is an organization that does advocacy and outreach and organizing. That was, in fact, founded by those same group of students, and they've remained leaders in it over the period of years. It's SIM, the Student Immigrant Movement. A larger national organization, which maybe has a bit more extensive online presence, is called United We Dream, because we're talking about who people call the dreamers, folks who are covered under the DREAM Act, which is still a dream, but hopefully will be part of any immigration reform legislation that gets passed. So those 2, and Jennifer can perhaps talk a bit more and help refer you to sort of local organizations. Certainly, I, by the way, have at the table in the back, there's a variety of information, including my card, and the red table at the back where Diana's sitting. So feel free to take that and be in touch with me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question from a member of the audience. Why are people opposed to immigration reform, especially when most of them were immigrants themselves?
Yeah, isn't that really the question that all of us are looking for an answer to, right? I think, well, I mean, I'd like to say that it's just ignorance. That if people had the benefit of some of the knowledge that we're sharing here today about what immigrants come here for, who they are, and how much they speak to what's really best about the values of this country, in addition to what they contribute to this country, I would hope that might help turn a few minds. But the Forum on Tolerance has been going on for 30 years, and I think we still need things like this to sort of help deal with a very deeply rooted prejudice and bias that is in many parts of the community. So I'm not sure that that's really the answer, but the question, I think, kind of stands alone as the answer. It is a big irony that such a large, maybe up to half of the population of this state and many states in the country are either come from immigrant backgrounds, in some cases going back no more than a couple of generations, And yet we do see this rooted. Now, it's true. There's, when you look at it, there's very big differences in the immigrant population that we're facing. So it's not necessarily just, just resistance against immigrants as a class. It might be immigrants towards immigrants of a particular color, or a particular social background, or a particular ethnic identity or national origin. So there are, again, probably as many varieties of bias towards immigrants as there are, reasons to support immigrants.
Thank you very much. Okay, and that concludes the question and answer section for Dr. Gross. Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce our second panelist, Dr. Marcia Drew Hone. Dr. Hone leads the Public Education Institute at the Immigrant Learning Center in Malden. Her work is educating the public about positive impact immigrants have on the American economy and communities. She works in partnership with key local and national organizations and has published research on immigrants as entrepreneurs, workers, and consumers. Dr. Hone was awarded the New Bostonians Community Champion Award in 2011 for demonstrating consistent commitment in nurturing a dialogue and inspiring action to facilitate the full integration of immigrants in Boston and beyond. Welcome, Dr. Hone.
Well, good morning, everyone, and it really is a privilege to be here, and I thank the group that both envisioned and organized this event, especially Diana Carey, with whom I've had a long-term relationship. And I'm here today to talk about immigrants as assets and their specific economic and social contributions. Now, I'm standing up because I'm a small woman, and I can't see you all in the back if I sit down. And it's also going to be easier to read the slides here. So, just to tell you a little bit about where all this information that I'm going to share with you today came from. I'm director of the Public Education Institute at the Immigrant Learning Center that is in Malden, not very far away from here. And that's started as an English language learning center in 1992, which is a mission it continues today. And there's about 400 students there at any given time. A lot of them come from Lynn. And they come from 68 countries and 42 different language backgrounds. So it's a very diverse center. But back after the 9/11, the director, Diane Portnoy, was very concerned about the rising anti-immigrant sentiment and what the students at the ILC were experiencing on the streets. People pushing them, telling them to go home, we don't want you here. And it seemed like the anti-immigrant people were co-opting the conversation. And no one was telling the other side of the story what were the benefits that immigrants were bringing to this country. So we set out to document this, and our work is around, one, debunking myths, and we'll do a little fun exercise about this in a couple of minutes. But we also we said, well, we can't run around and say immigrants are good. We got to say how they're good. So we began commissioning research studies about immigrants as entrepreneurs and workers and consumers from our various universities around the greater Boston. And we make the immigrant voice very strong in all of these studies through interviews, profiles, commentary, etc. And we use these for presentations like this one, and events, and articles, and papers, and frankly, anyone who will listen to us. We're going to do a little quiz here. Don't get uptight about this, okay? And just have a little bit of fun with it. So one of the big myths you hear is that immigrants don't pay any taxes. And so we had a study called Massachusetts Immigrants by the Numbers, and it looked at tax payments. And so now immigrants are about 14.4% of the population overall in the state. Now, there's three options here for what percent they are of taxpayers in the state. So I'm going to say, A, B, and C, and just raise your hand for whichever one that you think it is. How many people think it's A, 10.2%? Anyone a caker for that? Oh, I got a couple. Okay, what about 16.4%? Okay, I got much more on that one. And then the last one, 19.9. Okay, maybe about the sort of tied between B and C. It's actually B. So remember, they're 14.4% of the population, but they are 16.4% of the taxpayers. That means they're paying in at a higher rate than their population numbers, and probably haven't found the tax shelters that other Massachusetts taxpayers have found to shelter their taxes. So here's another common myth, that the undocumented don't pay any taxes. And so how many people think, well, in fact, this is what the IRS, this is now federal income tax, the IRS estimates. How many people think 75% of the undocumented pay taxes? All right, I got a few tentative hands up there, okay. How about 60%? Okay, a little more there. And 40%. Okay. Again, it's pretty split between B and C. It's actually A. The IRS estimates that 75% of the undocumented population pay taxes through an ITIN number or through a fake Social Security number. But they are, in fact, paying those taxes. Okay, maybe just one more since we're a little out of time. In Massachusetts, what percentage of the leisure and hospitality businesses are owned by immigrants? What do you think? 15.4%? Any takers on that one? 33%? Okay. You're getting more confident now when you're voting. Okay. 40%, 40.6%? Okay. It's actually the middle one, 33%. Now remember, they're 14.4%. But they are owning 33% of these businesses. We'll do one more. In Massachusetts, what percent of the biotech companies do you think had at least one immigrant founder? Is it A, 38.3%? B, 18.1%? Okay, come on, you got to vote. I see a lot of you with no hands there. Okay, and C, 25.7. All right, yeah. There, you were right on that one. In fact, it is 25.7% of the biotech firms in Massachusetts had at least one immigrant founder. And I noticed when I walked in that Dr. Lee was up on the screen. Was anybody watching that? He is one of them who has developed a very successful biotech company called Boston Medical that is developing new protocols for treating cancer. Okay, so here you have immigrant entrepreneurs, immigrant businesses are, I've got to step back so I can read this better, are in fact critical in two of the state's leading industries, leisure and hospitality and biotechnology. And they're creating jobs, they're strengthening the local economies through that work, and very important, they're keeping Massachusetts on the cutting edge of innovation and medical research. So, now in leisure and hospitality, most of the immigrant businesses are concentrated in its two biggest sectors. That's food and food distribution, restaurants, etc., and accommodations. That's hotels, motels, etc. And here is one of those immigrant business people. He's actually a student at the Immigrant Learning Center. He's in level 3 because he says he needs to improve his writing skills in English. And he came from El Salvador and with his brothers, and right from the start, they said, we want to establish our own business and we want to make that business grow. So it was very intentional right from the beginning. Has anybody ever eaten in one of these restaurants? You have, okay. And they fix chicken every which way, I understand. And so now they own 5 restaurants. They've gone on to establish, collective buying consortium and invited other businesses to come in with them. and a very independent spirit right from the beginning. They wanted to be their own people. They didn't want to work for anyone else. They wanted to go out and found a business and create jobs for Americans. Now here's an example of another food business. This is Clara Sotanova, who she's out in the Berkshires actually, and she originally wanted to start a restaurant, but one day her husband was eating her cookies and he said, "Gosh, these are delicious, you ought to sell them." So she started out very small, out of her own kitchen, which is very typical, with her own financing, again, very typical. And since then, she's made the leap into phase 2 of her business. That is, she's now manufacturing cookies for large distribution in New York, really throughout most of New England. Now she's trying to move into phase 3. Now this is where you get big job creation, is that she will be packaging and selling to big chains like Whole Foods. So she's making that leap now. It requires a lot more financing now, a lot more workers to be able to do that. So leisure and hospitality is huge in this state because it is the 4th largest employer, employs over 300,000 people, and the immigrants own 33% of these businesses. So clearly they're making huge economic and social contribution through these enterprises. Now in technology and biotechnology, you also have people who are big job creators, big revenue generators. Here's one of them. This is Shifi Gogo from Ghana, and he founded Proxel. We found out about him because he was nominated for an Immigrant Entrepreneur Award in the technology science arena. And what he has done is to develop a mobile app that is able to help you verify the authenticity of drugs. That's not such a big problem here in this country, but it is in third world developing countries where they sell drugs that are not really safe or true to what they say they are. And he's one of these folks who, he got his, PhD here in this country. This is what you hear a lot about in the immigration reform bill, is that we can't let these people go back. Here we educated them in this country, they're going to make valuable contributions, and we're not letting them stay. Now here's another couple of guys who, Sonny and Sridhar, that founded AgriMatrix, and AgriMatrix makes the mobile health technology to measure blood glucose by plugging it into your iPhone. Now this is the wave of the future. They met when they were in college, and Sonny had come when he was 8. He escaped from Vietnam. Sridhar was second generation. He was born in this country. They met when they were in college, and they really clicked together. They both went their respective ways educationally and came back together to found AgriMatrix. And they're one of the early innovators in the whole mobile health technology applications. And biotech, see, these are big revenue generators. Biotech alone, and this doesn't all include all the other technology firms, and it has annual revenue of about $7.6 billion and employs 4,000 people in the state. So these are big job creators, big revenue creators. But equally important, I think, are all the businesses in the neighborhoods, because these are the ones that make up the fabric of local neighborhoods and help revitalize neighborhoods that have often been in long-term decline. And they get commerce going again. They attract new customers to coming into the area, and I've got a good example of that in just a couple of minutes. They help, they help improve the physical appearance of the neighborhood, and they enhance public safety, because when you have a lot of foot traffic going on and a lot of people walking around in lights, it tends to be safer. And here is one of these entrepreneurs. Does anyone know Saw Pereira? He's well known in the El Salvadorian community. You're nodding your head. Okay. And he was undocumented when he came. He came at age 16. He didn't know any English, but he seemed to have a facility for languages. And so he learned both Italian and English, which made him very attractive to real estate people. He learned the real estate business and then started his own business in 2004. And he said, the good news, I hung in there, so I'm still in business. But I think what's really important is he now mentors and coaches other immigrant businesses. Now, here's some people who are right in Lynn, and I see I've got 1 minute, so I'm going to talk really fast. CM Bistro, does anyone know that? Has anyone been there? I see one hand. Mexico Lindo, yeah. And Tatiana's, not this Tatiana.
Another
Okay.
Tatiana.
And many of these businesses are growing substantially and moving into the growth area where they're creating more jobs, more revenue. I'll give just a couple of quick examples without going in any details, but here's Julia Severio of Severio Insurance Company in Lawrence, Rafael Guzman of RM Technologies, also in Lawrence. The folks, they won our Immigrant Entrepreneur Award last 2 years in the growth category. And and I'll end with just some information, just some thoughts about the next generation coming up. And many of you, in fact, most of you, I think, looking out at the audience, you're part of this generation that is going to be the future of America. And we have Penn and Jeffrey and Sonka. Penn got an MS in social work. He now is a counselor at Bunker Hill Community College. Jeffrey Suarez got a master's degree in urban planning at MIT and is now out in California at the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley. And Sonka Lam is working in applied linguistics at UMass Boston. So like you, they're the future of this country. We're a nation of immigrants. We always have been, and there always will be our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hone. And now we'd like to open the floor to questions. We have 10 minutes for any questions that you may want to ask.
Do you feel that the media has had more of a positive and negative impact on how we view immigrants?
Well, it depends on the media. Now, if you're talking about Fox News, no. It's been loathed and fearing, on primetime news. And certain papers. There is an organization called the Center for Immigration Studies that is rabidly anti-immigrant and have been very successful in positioning themselves as having credible information about immigrants. But in fact, what they do is they take a snapshot in time when things look really the worst, like for amount of social services or something used, and they use only that statistic. They talk about immigrant households getting food stamps, but they don't talk about the number of people working in those or that the children are, in fact, U.S. citizens. So, yes, they've co-opted the conversation. However, there's been a lot of places that have really given very good and favorable. The New York Times has been one. The Boston Globe's variable. And one thing I didn't mention, but I really think that a lot of this stuff is at the local level. I mean, because that's where people's hearts and minds are. It's what's happening in my community. Wait a minute, I can't see you because the flag is in the way. But right now, as you know, Lynn City Hall is doing concerts. And they're pretty good, actually, I understand. I looked at the lineup. Does anyone go to any of those concerts? They just had the Midtown Boys. Yeah, I see one person, and I know they've got Alice Cooper coming, and they've got the Celtic Women are coming in December. Anyway, what we've done is through the efforts of some people, they're now connecting the concerts with opportunities to get great ethnic food in Lynn. So the restaurants are offering discounts to have people come in and eat before the conference, that get advertised on the concert websites, and also get, also are at the point of sale of tickets. So that's a good way for people to begin appreciating the good things that they can see and participate in right in their local communities. And I'm thinking increasingly, the more that kind of thing can be done, the more you're going to reach the hearts and minds of people who are undecided. You're never going to, you've got the pro-immigrant group over here, they're always going to be pro-immigrant. You've got the small anti-immigrant, and it's small too, anti-immigrant people over there, you're never going to change their minds. But you have a great swath of people in the middle who are undecided and don't have a lot of good information or experiences to draw on. That was a long-winded answer, but I wanted to bring in that stuff about the concert.
You mentioned that the IRS estimates that 75% of undocumented immigrants pay federal taxes.
Yes.
How do they identify themselves as undocumented immigrants, and does it present a risk to them for remaining in the country?
Well, they are identified because if you file under an ITIN number, that will automatically say you don't have a valid Social Security number. And also, if the number comes up as a no match, then they know that it's not a good number, so they're estimating. They use special algorithms to come up with those estimates of the undocumented population. No, it doesn't put people at risk because federal organizations are not allowed to share information. So the IRS can't say, oh, look, this person filed under an ITIN number.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the myths that is out there is that undocumented students take away seats from community colleges and state colleges and universities. I wonder if you could address that issue, please.
Jeff may actually have more specific information on that, but my understanding is there's not any, that the perspective of the community college and college presidents, in fact, this will enlarge the scope of net revenue for those institutions, and that it won't in any way diminish what is available to American-born students. Do you want to add anything to that, Jeff?
That's basically right. I mean, not only is there a large support amongst the presidents, but there's data that, in fact, bringing in the share of undocumented students could actually add revenue through new tuition. And there's certainly more than enough capacity and seats in the system to accommodate this often very high-achieving and very ambitious group of students.
Yes, if you ever look at all the people who are valedictorians in the Boston Public Schools, you know how they publish that list, the pictures of the kids every spring. You know, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but an amazingly high percentage of them come from other countries.
Let me just ask a question here from a member of the audience. Overall, immigrants are doing well in the labor force, so why is it still hard for immigrants to get started when they come to the United States without family or friends to help them? And furthermore, are there not ways that can help them enroll in schools and get jobs?
Well, I'm not sure I'd make the statement that they're doing well in the labor force, because, I mean, I think there are certain segments of the labor force in which they do extremely well. But overall, the incomes are much lower among immigrants, and the more recent you are as an immigrant, the more likely you are to have lower income. So, and when people come, if they don't have English language skills, which most people don't, and of course there's always the myth that, you know, oh, my great-grandfather, you know, they came over and they spent a week on the boat and they stepped off speaking perfect English, where all of us know it takes 5 years at a minimum to become really fluent in another language. So, so I think language is a big, it's a big problem in getting a foothold into, the labor market. Very often people have credentials that don't translate well to this country, particularly in the healthcare field. And so I think they're now beginning to look at alternative pathways so that they can utilize the talent and the skills and the education that those folks bring. But licensure in those kind of professions is a really difficult thing. It's why a lot of immigrants start their own businesses, because they feel that they have a better shot at getting an economic toehold here through their business ownership than they would if they went out and took a low-wage job until they got the English language skills. And I'm sure all of you can think of other reasons, but I know the loneliness of leaving your country and your culture and your language and your family and all your support systems behind must be devastating when you come here. I mean, I think immigration overall is a real act of courage and daring to be able to give up everything and come here. So I think there's a whole language and lack of support systems, not good support systems to help you integrate when you get to this country, but Jeff's working hard on this here in Massachusetts. They all play into this.
Thank you. So we technically only have 1 minute, but I think the schedule is going to go out the window because we have at least 4 or 5.
What positive or negative outcomes do you think the immigration reform is going to have with the government shutdown?
Well, to be short, I know they were hoping there would be a window of opportunity opening up in Congress to bring back the immigration bill in the House. And as you know, the House members came up with their own, the House Democrat caucus came up with their own immigration bill, very much like what the Senate passed. It had some differences,
Thank you.
but it's not going to be good. But it doesn't mean, it means there's a lot of people fighting really hard to bring this to the fore, and I feel optimistic that it will get passed sometime in the near future. Do you want to add to that, Jeff? Because Jeff's right in the middle of this fight.
Thank you, Marcia. No, I think you said it very well. I mean, the Democrats in the Congress have just introduced a competing bill. I'm sorry, in the House of Representatives. It is going to be a hard fight, but it's certainly one that actually a bipartisan group of folks in Congress, as well as a very large share of supporters around the country, are dedicated to. One other point I want to make to build on something Marcia said about the local nature of the lives that immigrant lives. There was our beloved, much beloved and old former leader of Congress, Tip O'Neill, used to say all politics is local. And certainly in terms of the forces that shape the lives of immigrants, state policy and state forces actually play as much as federal. Of course, it's federal policy that affects many macro factors, including immigration status and visas, and that shape who comes and what people face when they're here. But in terms of the kinds of structures and systems that Marcia mentioned, whether it's education, whether it's workforce, whether it's business opportunity, access to healthcare, and a whole range of state services and opportunities that really shape all of our lives, those of immigrants included. So much happens at the state level, and I think that's also, frankly, for us, a place where we see a lot of promise, as well as the need for sort of constant fighting on the legislative front.
Okay, we're going to try to sneak some more questions since we have about 3 minutes. So we're going to go to the lady at the mic on this side.
Hello. My question is that both my parents are Dominican, and I was born in the United States. I went to a few after-school programs to try to get into colleges or trade school. I did go to the Career Center, the Career Center here in Lynn. They told me that people that are immigrants have to approach the testing first before anyone else. Why was it a difference between immigrants and myself?
Well, you were born in this country?
Yes, I was born in this country.
Well, then they're wrong.
So I missed on that was my whole thing, is that there was a few of us that missed on an opportunity because they wanted to take care of the immigrants first. I have no problems with that at all. But just the fact that everybody's equal to one, not just because they're immigrants, doesn't mean that they get the opportunity first. So.
I see what you're saying. You're a citizen, and so you felt like you were pushed aside, and
Yes.
that people who were the immigrants that under the new DACA stuff to try to help these kids, that you got pushed aside. Yeah, well, I mean, I think so there's reality in those kind of things, and I think sometimes in issues of fairness, and that I don't think they happen very often, but they do happen. And I know that people who waited a long time to get into this country feel very strongly that I waited my turn. I spent 10 years in a refugee camp waiting to get here, and I don't feel good about other people not waiting, putting in the same time that I did. So I think those are realities, but I don't think it's huge, and I'm sorry you experienced that.
Okay, the gentleman at the mic over there.
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of important things. I've noticed, like I'm at UMass, that most of the kids who are immigrants seem like they do much better academically. In my study groups, it seems like a larger portion of like the high GPA students in economics are from our immigrants. And I think locally it is important, because when I was in Texas, there was a lot of Mexican-American immigrants. When I'm out here, it's different. And it's almost like the question needs to be split into two questions, because a lot of people are just thinking immigrants are low-end jobs from Central and Latin America. But then there's the other end of the spectrum, that immigrants from Asia have a higher education level than our own population. And do you think we need to separate the question with trying to get people in for work visas for the talent mismatch? Like a lot of jobs we don't have properly educated people to fill. And I think a lot of time the question is either like this person's from India to take an IT job, or this person's from Mexico to work like in a low-end job, when in reality it's mostly not to either that degree. And I feel like it just gets lost in the mix, like to separate the different types of immigrants and what roles they play. Do you feel like the question needs to be kind of split into more specific issues than just immigration as a whole, sort of?
Yeah, well, I think I think you make good points, that there's great diversity within the immigrant population, and different levels of education and experiences and expertise that comes into the country. And of course, that's what, if you look at the immigration bill that was passed by the Senate, there's a big chunk of H-1B visas for people who are graduating, coming out of our graduate schools. And if you have a master's or a PhD in engineering or science, people want to staple a green card to your diploma. And there's no question that these are wonderful folks, and we need them in the country. I'm expressing a personal opinion now, because I think that an immigration policy that would be based on just your skill level, or your experience or your education, or some kind of like point system, or like let's let in all those smart kids from Asia, which is not necessarily true, but they certainly have that reputation, is very short-sighted. Because when you look at all those immigrants that I tried to show you a variety of people. Saul Pereira came here undocumented, he didn't speak any English, he didn't have any education. Look what he's gone on to achieve. Look at what Saul Ortiz has gone on to achieve. So I don't think necessarily just because somebody doesn't come with a whole lot of credentials or money or whatever behind them doesn't mean that they can't be successful in this country. So I would not like to see, and also there's a really hugely important role that families play in all of people's immigration experiences. And if you look at those three young people, Sonka, Penn, and Jeffrey, they said they were all here, they were all got to where they were because of their parents. Their parents came here so they could have a better life, and they supported them through their educational experience, even though they weren't able to guide them very well because they didn't know the system. Jeffrey's mother cleaned houses. He can remember going to clean houses with her. But she provided the environment and emotional and psychological support that allowed him to wind up at MIT. And now to go back to Los Angeles and give back to that community. So, a personal opinion, you know, I think there's a huge role that families play, and so basing your immigration system on points for education, et cetera, or because of a reputation of a particular ethnic group is, I think, very short-sighted.
Thank you, Dr. Hone. I am sorry we ran out of time. The people that I have a question from the audience, and it looks like somebody else. Maybe they can talk to you after. Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to remind everybody that the second part of today's forum is going to start at 11 with 2 North Shore Community College students and an attorney on immigration. Before you leave, I'd like to introduce Diana Carey. She is the director of the Public Policy Institute, and she'll tell you about an activity that will take place during the break. Thank you very much to both our panelists.
Please don't leave yet. We have a couple of things that we'd like to suggest to you on the way out. First of all, we have a map that is posted on the wall over there. And what that is a map to capture all of our national origins. As we have many times said today, we are from all over the world. And we hope that you will put a little dot, or maybe several little dots, on the places where you have your national roots, where your immigrant forebears came from. So it may be that you are going to have to cover up on top of a great pile of dots that are already there, or you might be from somewhere else. Find the locations. We will have a couple of students over here who are going to be handing out the dots, and we'll ask you to do that in just a minute. But I do have a couple of other things I want to mention. My role at the Public Policy Institute, which is co-sponsoring this forum, is to encourage civic participation. And I want to tell you about a couple of opportunities that are very important right now regarding immigration reform. There is a march on Saturday in Boston to draw attention to the need for reform. It is in downtown Boston at noon, and it will be starting from the public library at Copley Square. So we'd like to encourage your participation in that event. Also, we have flyers at the back of the room on one of the tables. There is an opportunity to encourage Congress, to use your voice to encourage Congress to adopt some policies and get on with it in terms of immigration reform. So please pick up a flyer at the back or sign the petition. We're going to be delivering the petitions to John Tierney's office with the hope that he takes them to the Speaker of the House, whose name I won't say. Anyway, so please stick around. We have a really great panel for the second half of this program. We encourage you to stay. If we have to leave, we do understand, but please take an opportunity to record your origins. We're going to post that map in the cafeteria of the Lynn campus afterwards. Thank you.